Welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name's James Salvatore, and today I have something special for you here. This is a 1979 Trans Am. Now, it's not like a lot of the other cars I've done, seeing that a lot of the stuff I do is new. However, just look at this thing. You can't beat the classic lines of an old car, and that's why I wanted to introduce something like this to the channel to add a nice variety. If you're new, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification because you're not going to want to miss out on what we have to offer here. I do everything from new cars, old stuff, and everything in between. And with that, let's get into the video.
In the late 1970s, the Trans Am was one of the sole surviving muscle cars at the time due to federal oil embargoes in the United States that led to a nationwide gas shortage as well as strict emission regulations. The 79 model year marked the 10th anniversary for the Trans Am, bringing in a facelift for the popular second-generation car featured in the hit film Smokey and the Bandit. In 79, General Motors produced a total of 211,453 Firebirds, and out of that came a total of 117,108 Trans Ams. And out of that 117,108 Trans Ams, only about 8,326 of them had the Pontiac 400 big block engine, and the rest of them got the Oldsmobile 403 cubic inch V8.
For 79, you had three engine choices. The first one being a small block 301 cubic inch V8, putting out 150 horsepower and 240 foot-pounds of torque. The next option was the Pontiac 400. This was the sought-after engine. This was the engine everybody wanted. And this engine produced 220 horsepower and 320 foot-pounds of torque. Now the last one, which a lot of people don't know about, was the Oldsmobile-built 403, which produced 185 horsepower and 315 foot-pounds of torque. Now you might be saying to yourself, why was there an Oldsmobile engine and a Pontiac Firebird? Well, the reason for that goes back to the oil embargo and restricting emissions of the times. You see, Pontiac with the Trans Am tried to keep the big block alive for as long as they could. However, they were restricted to how many units they could produce in 79, and they stockpiled as many engine blocks as they could, but once they were out of their set amount, they were not allowed to produce more of them. So they resorted to putting the Oldsmobile big block, which was the 403, into the Trans Am to keep the big block tradition alive, at least for the remaining few years they could. So what makes this car a little bit more special than your average Trans Am is this car belongs to a friend of mine. A friend of mine's dad in particular. This is a one-owner, all-original car. What that means is every scratch, every dent, every custom piece, it all has a story. All of it. And that's awesome. He daily drove this to high school. He drove it throughout his 20s. And he's let his kids drive it, everything. And it just keeps going. And this car just transcends time. And that's one of the cool things about it. Never been painted, interior's original block, everything. You name it, this car is original. It's as is since 1979. You see, the thing with this car is it's not showroom perfect, but that's what makes it perfect, because this car has transcended time. It's exactly the way it was from when it rolled off the factory, minus a few custom things that he did over the years. And things like that make a car special. You wouldn't want this car any other way. Now, this car may not have the big block, which for some people, or a manual, which for some people would kind of, not be as desirable, but with this car, you don't care. Nothing's like when you're going down the road, cruising in this thing, and you got that shaker scoop ahead of you shaking down the road, and you see that flying chicken. Nothing's like that. Nothing's like that. And no matter where you go, this thing turns heads. It always does. And people will always give you comments on it. It's nothing but positivity that comes out of people when they see something like this. Now, I review a lot of more high-end, expensive cars, and most people, when they see you, like, oh, it's just another person. But when somebody sees you in this, it's almost like you become that superhero from the Burt Reynolds movie from the 70s all over again. Now, I'd like to talk to you about some of the custom things in this car, because they have interesting, cool stories behind them. For instance, this dashboard was custom made. What Jim did was, in the 70s, he didn't like the original machined look dash that they had. So what he did was he made his own wooden dash. And now, to do this was very difficult. He had to cut everything out, make sure it lined up perfectly, and then he had to soak the wood in a bathtub for 3 days and then put it on 2 little ladders, and then he put weights in the middle of it to get the curve so it would curve in perfectly. Now, if that's not cool enough, it doesn't end there. Back in the 70s, you can imagine stereo systems weren't all that good. You know, stereo systems haven't been good in cars really up until recently. So back then, if you wanted a good stereo, you had to go custom. Now, in this car, what he did was he replaced the stock system about 2 weeks after he got the car. He ripped the whole interior out, disassembled everything, installed this Panasonic head unit, and he installed all custom Alpine speakers, which for the day was a big deal because stuff like this ran a pretty penny. But this is still a kicking sound system even today, and I can say that with confidence. Now, another thing that he did that was a custom thing, because he didn't get the manual, you know, he would still want to shift. So he took out the stock Trans Am shifter, which honestly, in my opinion, is a good thing because I think it looked ugly. This just looks so much cooler. He installed a custom B&M bump shifter. So when you're going down the road, if you're at a standstill, this is a 3-speed car. Now, you put it in drive, you bump it back, right? And then when you want to shift, you just bump the shifter forward and it'll let you go to the next gear, which was pretty neat because back then, you know, in an automatic, you really didn't get much control over the gears. That's just a nice little touch that he had with this. Next, I'd like to talk about some of the interesting quirks and features of the 79 Trans Am and just kind of 70s cars in general. You know, they had more of a charm than today's modern cars do. Today's cars have kind of just lost, you know, the little things. This car has a lot of the little things. For instance, if you look on the side of this car, you're not going to see any obstruction from a gas cap whatsoever. On this side, nothing. This was a smart concept. So what they decided to do was they made this little door in the center here. You just pop it open and there's your gas cap. And on top of that, this is where you open the trunk. Now, if that isn't cool, I don't know what is. Another cool thing here that a lot of today's cars don't have, in fact, I don't even know if any cars today still have louvers, but I love this, is just look at this. Now, you think it would obstruct your vision, you know, when you're driving, but it really doesn't at all. You can see perfectly clear out the back window with no obstructions whatsoever. Another area you could definitely tell looks took priority over everything is how they integrated the antenna. Now, back in the 70s, if you've ever gone to a classic car show, which you probably have if you're watching this channel, and seen classic cars, you see these big, beefy antennas that look honestly awful even today. Pontiac integrated the antenna in a very smart way. So what they did was they put a few strips in the windshield going down and across. And that was the antenna. Isn't that brilliant? Cars today sometimes don't even do this. And this was 1979 and they were doing something like that. To me, that just shows me their commitment to making this car the coolest looking car they could. Now, even though this is a small block, that doesn't mean that it doesn't sound cool. Next, we're gonna have to definitely get an exhaust clip for you. that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like and give me a subscribe if you want to see more. And down in the comments, please leave a comment telling me what kind of cars you'd like me to review in the future, because that'll help me out a lot to bring some awesome content to you. With that said, thanks for watching.